All right, you guys, good morning and happy Monday. Hope you all had a good weekend. We are rapidly approaching the end of the year. I didn't realize how little time we have left. So it is kind of full steam ahead with this book if you want to finish it in time for the end of the year. So this week we'll be trying to get through chapters 2 and 3. Chapter 2 is a little bit shorter. Chapter 3 is a little bit longer. This one today is going to start on page 17. One weird quirk about this book, as you notice, there's no chapter numbers, and for some reason, but this is chapter 2, technically, even though it doesn't say it. And so where we're picking up, George and Lenny had camped outside of town. They were a little bit late getting to Soledad. I think it's Soledad, something like that. They were a little late getting into town on account of the bus driver, and so they camped out outside of town. Now they're going to actually arrive. You're going to meet a lot of interesting characters here. Chapter 2, a lot of setup. We're going to go till the top of 28 today. So without further ado, go ahead and get started. The bunkhouse was a long, rectangular building. Inside, the walls were whitewashed and the floor unpainted. In 3 walls, there were small square windows, and the 4th, a solid door with a wooden latch. Against the walls were 8 bunks, 5 of them made up with blankets, and the other three showing their burlap ticking. Over each bunk, there was nailed an apple box with the opening forward so that it made 2 shelves for the personal belongings of the occupant of the bunk. And these shelves were loaded with little articles, soap and talcum powder, razors, and those Western magazines ranchmen love to read and scoff at and secretly believe. And there were medicines on the shelves and little vials, combs, and from nails in the box sides, a few neckties. Near one wall there was a black cast iron stove, its stovepipes going straight up through the ceiling. In the middle of the room stood a big square table littered with playing cards, and around it were grouped boxes for the players to sit on. At about 10 o'clock in the morning, the sun threw a bright, dust-laden bar through one of the side windows, and in and out of the beam flies shot like rushing stars. The wooden latch raised, the door opened, and a tall, stoop-shouldered old man came in. He was dressed in blue jeans, and he carried a big push broom in his left hand. Behind him, George, and behind George, Lenny. "The boss was expecting you last night," the old man said. "He was sore as hell when you wasn't here to go out this morning." He pointed with his right arm, and out of the sleeve came a round, stick-like wrist, but no hand. "You got them 2 buttons at the beds there," he said, indicating 2 bunks near the stove. George stepped over and threw his blankets down the burlap sack of straw that was a mattress. He looked into his box shelf and then picked a small yellow can from it. "Say, what the hell's this?" "I don't know," said the old man. "It says positively kills lice, roaches, and other scourges. What the hell kind of bed you giving us anyways? We don't want no pants rabbits." Pants rabbits. What a great term that is. Pants rabbits. The old swamper shifted his broom and held it between his elbow and his side while he held out his hand for the can. He studied the label carefully. "Tell you what," he said finally. "Last guy that had this bed was a blacksmith. Hell of a nice fella and as clean a guy as you'd want to meet. Used to wash his hands even after he ate." "And how come he got graybacks?" George was working up a slow anger. Then he put his bindle on the neighboring bunk and sat down. He watched George with open mouth. "Tell you what," said the old swamper. "This here blacksmith, named Whitey, was the kind of guy that would put that stuff around even if there wasn't no bugs. Just to make sure, see? Tell you what he used to do. At meals, he'd peel his boiled potatoes, and he'd take out every little spot, no matter what kind, before he'd eat it. If there was a red splotch on an egg, he'd scrape it off. Finally quit about the food. That's the kind of guy he was, clean. Used to dress up in Sundays, even when he wasn't going no place. Put on a necktie even, then sit in the bunkhouse." "I ain't so sure," said George skeptically. "What did you say he quit for?" The old man put the yellow can in his pocket and he rubbed his bristly white whiskers with his knuckles. He just quit the way a guy will. Says it was the food, just wanted to move. Didn't give no other reason but the food. Just says, give me my time one night, the way any guy would." George lifted his tick and looked underneath it. He leaned over and inspected the sacking closely. Immediately, Lenny got up and did the same with his bed. Finally, George seemed satisfied. He unrolled his bundle and put things on the shelf, his razor and a bar of soap, his comb and a bottle of pills, his liniment and leather wristband. Then he made his bed up neatly with blankets. The old man said, "I guess the boss will be out here in a minute. He was sure burned when you weren't here this morning. Come right in when he was eating breakfast and says, 'Where the hell's them new men?' And he'd give the stable buck hell, too." George patted a wrinkle out of his bed and sat down. "Give the stable buck hell?" he asked. "Sure. You see, the stable buck's a nigger." "Nigger, huh?" "Yeah, nice fella, too. Got a crooked back when a horse kicked him. The boss gives him hell when he's mad. The stable buck don't give a damn about that. He reads a lot. Got books in his room." "What kind of guy is the boss?" George asked. "Well, he's a pretty nice fella. Gets pretty mad sometimes, but he's pretty nice. Tell you what he done Christmas? Bring a gallon of whiskey right here and says, 'Drink hearty, boys. Christmas comes but once a year.' The hell he did. Whole gallon? Yes, sir. Jesus, we had fun. They let the nigger come in that night. Little skidder named Smitty took after the nigger. Done pretty good, too. The guys wouldn't let him use his feet, so the nigger got him. If he could have used his feet, Smitty says he would have killed the nigger. The guy says on account of the nigger's got a crooked back, Smitty can't use his feet." He paused and relished the memory. "After that, the guys went into Soledad and raised hell. I didn't go in there. I ain't got the poop no more." Lenny was just finished making his bed. The wooden latch raised again and the door opened. A little stocky man stood in the doorway. He wore blue jean trousers, a flannel shirt, a black unbuttoned vest, and a black coat. His thumbs were stuck in his belt, on each side of a square steel buckle. On his head was a soiled brown Stetson hat, and he wore high-heeled boots and spurs to prove he was not a laboring man. This guy's gonna be Curly. Oh, sorry, no, that's not Curly yet. No, this is the boss. My bad. The old swamper looked quickly at him and then shuffled to the door, rubbing his whiskers with his knuckles as he went. "Them guys just come," he said, and shuffled past the boss and out the door. The boss stepped into the room with the short, quick steps of a fat-legged man. "I wrote Murray and Reddy. I wanted 2 men this morning. You got your work slips?" George reached into his pocket and produced the slips and handed them to his boss. "It wasn't a Murray Reddy's fault. It says right here on the slip that you wanted to be here for work this morning." George looked down at his feet. "Bus driver give us a bum steer," he said. "We had to walk 10 miles. It says we was here when we wasn't. We couldn't get no rides in the morning." The boss squinted his eyes. "Well, I had to send out the grain team short 2 buckers. Won't do any good to go now till after dinner." He pulled his time book out of his pocket and opened it where a pencil was stuck between the leaves. George scowled meaningfully at Lenny, and Lenny nodded to show that he understood. The boss licked his pencil. "What's your name?" "George Milton." "And what's yours?" George said, "His name is Lenny Small." The names were entered in the book. "Let's see, this is the 20th, noon the 20th. He closed the book. "Where you boys been working?" "Up around Weed," said George. "You too?" to Lenny. "Yeah, him too," said George. The boss pointed a playful finger at Lenny. "He ain't much of a talker, is he?" "No, he ain't, but he's sure the hell good worker, strong as a bull." Lenny smiled to himself. "Strong as a bull," he repeated. George scowled at him, and Lenny dropped his head in shame at having forgotten. The boss said suddenly, "Listen, Small!" Lenny raised his head. "What can you do?" In a panic, Lenny looked at George for help. "He can do anything you tell him," said George. "He's a good skinner. He can wrestle gram bags, drive a cultivator. He can do anything. Just give him a try." The boss turned on George. "Then why don't you let him answer? What are you trying to put over?" George broke in loudly. "Oh, I ain't saying he's bright. He ain't. But I say he's a goddamn good worker. He can put up a 400-pound bale." The boss deliberately put the little book in his pocket. He hooked his thumbs in his belt and squinted, one eye nearly closed. "Say, what you selling?" "Huh?" "I said, what stake you got in this guy? You taking his pay away from him?" "No, of course I ain't. Why you think I'm selling him out?" Well, I've never seen one guy take so much trouble for another guy. I'd just like to know what your interest is. George said, he's my cousin. I told his old lady I'd look after him. He got kicked in the head by a horse when he was a little kid. He's alright, just ain't bright, but he can do anything you tell him. The boss turned half away. Well, God knows you don't need no, you don't need no any brains to buck barley bags. Don't you try nothing over, Milton. I got my eye on you. Why'd you quit weed? The job was done, said George promptly. What kind of job? We was digging a cesspool. All right, but don't try to put nothing over, 'cause you can't get away with nothing. I seen wise guys before go on with the grain teams after dinner. They're picking up barley at the thresher machine. Go out with Slim's team. Slim? Yeah, big tall Skinner. You'll see him after dinner. He turned abruptly and went to the door, but before he went out, he turned and looked for a long moment at the two men. When the sound of his footsteps had died away, George turned on Lenny. So you wasn't gonna say a word. You was gonna leave your big flapper shut and leave me to do the talking. Damn near lost us the job. Lenny stared hopelessly at his hands. I forgot, George. Yeah, you forgot. You always forget, and I gotta talk you out of it. He sat down heavily on the bunk. Now he's got his eye on us. Now we gotta be careful and not make no slips. You keep your big flapper shut after this. He fell morosely silent. George, what do you want now? I wasn't kicked in the head with no horse, was I, George? Be a damn good thing if you was, George said viciously. Save everybody a hell of a lot of trouble. You said I was your cousin, George. Well, that was a lie, and I'm damn glad it was. If I was a relative of yours, I'd shoot myself. He stopped suddenly, stepped to the open front door, and peered out. Say, what the hell you doing listening? The old man came slowly into the room. He had his broom in his hand, and at his heels there walked a drag-footed sheepdog, gray of muzzle and with pale, blind old eyes. The dog struggled lamely to the side of the room and lay down, grunting softly to himself and licking his grizzled, moth-eaten coat. The swamper watched him until he was settled. I wasn't listening. I was just standing in the shade a minute, scratching my dog. I just now finished swamping out the wash house. You was poking your big ears in our business, George said. I don't like nobody to get nosy. The old man looked uneasily from George to Lenny and then back. I just come there, he said. I didn't hear nothing you guys was saying. I ain't interested in nothing you was saying. A guy on a ranch don't never listen, or he don't ask no questions. Damn right he don't, said George, slightly mollified. Not if he wants to stay working long. But he was reassured by the swamper's defense. Come on in and sit down a minute, he said. That's a hell of an old dog. Yeah, I had him ever since he was a pup. God, he was a good sheepdog when he was younger. He stood his broom against the wall and he rubbed his white bristled cheek with his knuckles. How do you like the boss? He asked. Pretty good. Seemed all right. He's a nice fella, Swamper agreed. You got to take him right. I think this is Curly. Here we go. At that moment, a young man came into the bunkhouse, a thin young man with a brown face, with brown eyes, and a head of tightly curled hair. He wore a work glove on his left hand, and like the boss, he wore high-heeled boots. See my old man? He asked. The swamper said, he was just here a minute ago, Curly. Went over to the cookhouse, I think. I'll try to catch him, said Curly. His eyes passed over the new man and he stopped. He glanced coldly at George and then at Lenny. His arms gradually bent to the elbows and his hands closed into fists. He stiffened and went to a slight crouch. His glance was at once calculated and pugnacious. Lenny squirmed under the look and shifted his feet nervously. Curly stepped gingerly close to him. You the new guys the old man was waiting for? We just come in, said George. Let the big guy talk. Lenny twisted with embarrassment. George said, suppose he don't want to talk. Curly lashed his body round. By Christ, he's got to talk when he's spoke to. What the hell are you getting into for? We travel together, said George coldly. Oh, so it's that way. George was tense and motionless. Yeah, it's that way. Lenny was looking helplessly at George for instruction. And you won't let the big guy talk, is that it? He can talk if he wants to tell you anything. He nodded slightly to Lenny. You just come in, said Lenny softly. Curly stared levelly at him. Well, next time you answer when you're spoke to. He turned toward the door and walked out, and his elbows were still bent out a little. George watched him out, and he turned back to the swamper. Say, what in the hell he's got on his shoulder? Lenny didn't do nothing to him. The old man looked cautiously at the door to make sure no one was listening. That's the boss's son, he said quietly. Curly's pretty handy. He done quite a bit in the ring. He's a lightweight. He's handy. So he used to be a boxer, essentially. Is what they're kind of referring to there as a lightweight and handy. Did quite a bit in the ring, as Curly used to be a boxer. That's why he walks around with his arms bent. It's like kind of show off his muscles. Well, let him be handy, said George. He don't have to take after Lenny. Lenny didn't do nothing to him. What's he got against Lenny? Swamper considered. Well, I'll tell you what. Curly Curly's a lot like a lot of little guys. He hates big guys. He's all the time picking scraps with big guys. Kind of like he's mad at them because he ain't a big guy. You see little guys like that, ain't you? Always scrappy. Sure, said George. I've seen plenty of tough little guys, but this Curly better not make no mistakes about Lenny. Lenny ain't handy, but this Curly punk is going to get hurt if he messes around with Lenny. Well, Curly's pretty handy, the swamper said skeptically. Never did seem right to me. Suppose Curly jumps a big guy and licks him. Everybody says what a game guy Curly is. And suppose he does the same thing and gets licked. Then everybody says the big guy ought to pick somebody's own size. And maybe they gang up on the big guy. Never did seem right to me. Seems like Curly ain't giving nobody a chance. George was watching the door. He said ominously, well, he better watch out for Lenny. Lenny ain't no fighter, but Lenny's strong and quick, and Lenny don't know no rules. He walked to the square table and sat down on one of the boxes. He gathered some of the cards together and shuffled them. The old man sat down on another box. Don't tell Curly I said none of this. He'd slough me. He just don't give a damn. Won't ever get canned because his old man's the boss. George cut the cards and began turning them over, looking at each one and throwing it down in a pile. He said, this guy Curly sounds like a son of a bitch to me. I don't like mean guys. Seems to me he's worse lately, said the swamper. He got married a couple of weeks ago. Wife lives over in the boss's house. Seems like Curly is cocky ever since he got married. George grunted. Maybe he's showing off for his wife. The swamper warmed to his gossip. You seen that glove on his left hand? Yeah, I seen it. Well, that glove's full of Vaseline. Vaseline? What the hell for? Well, I'll tell you what. Curly says he's keeping that hand soft for his wife. George studied the cards absorbedly. That's a dirty thing to tell around, he said. The old man was reassured. He had drawn a derogatory statement from George. He felt safe now, and he spoke more confidently. Wait till you see Curly's wife. A couple important things, obviously. Watch out for Curly. He's already got it in for George, for Lenny, and that'll be a kind of a little bit of a conflict moving forward. Curly's wife too, another character that she's not introduced yet, but she will be important later on. Got 2 questions to answer in your Google Doc for the day, and then you are done. Otherwise, have a relaxing one, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.